What's up, folks at home? Welcome back to the channel. Today, you guessed it, we're gonna talk about the top 5 baits for the month of November. Now, I like to break November into 2 parts. You have late fall and you have early winter. I'm gonna give you my top 5 baits for late fall today. We're gonna break it down. We got underwater, we got fish catches, we got everything. Let's dive in. Another chunk. Let's go! That's another. All right, so first bait, if you've been watching the channel lately, you know that we have been on a fire rattle trap bite. Big fish, lots of fish. We've been catching them. Literally half-ounce trap right here from handing the M1 rattling trap. I have caught some big fish on this bait, right? We're talking 5, 6 pound class fish, 4 pound class fish. The rattle trap is a fantastic bait to throw this time of year for 2 reasons. 1, it's a pure reaction bite, and 2, it helps you cover a lot of water. Fish are moving from their fall locations into their wintering holes. You need to be able to fish baits through transition areas that cover a lot of water. Plus, this time of the year, you have a lot of dying vegetation. Fish are gonna be glued onto that. The trap is a great way to get after those fish. Now, you can pop it and hop it through that vegetation. You can straight fish it. But what you're gonna do if you find a windy pocket that's leading into a transition zone, you're gonna fish that trap and you can light them up. What I fish the trap on is key. A lot of guys fish traps and get bites but lose fish. The setup is clutch, right? I have not lost a fish this year on this setup. I am throwing a 7.3 medium heavy Saga rod from 6 Skill Fishing on a Cirrus 6 Skill Fishing 7-to-1 gear ratio. I'm slow rolling it, hopping it, popping it through there. I'm fishing this on 10-pound fluorocarbon for long casts in clear water that I'm dealing with. If you lose fish on a trap, it's because you're trying to muscle them, you're letting them jump. You gotta open that drag up, you gotta let them run, you gotta let them tire themselves out. It's cold water, those fish are gonna fight, and you can really catch them using this combo right here. It's great. So that's number 1 bait. Number 2 bait is in the same category, right? The chatterbait is going to make a re-entry into my lineup. I fished the chatterbait with a 4.5 rattle worm trailer on the back of it to add that extra pop to it. Now, everybody's mom, dad, sister, grandma, relatives throw a chatterbait. The chatterbait to me works really good from the mid-50s on down to that 38, 39 degree water. You can catch them on a chatterbait. Now, how I'm throwing a chatterbait here, I'm throwing it in the same places that I would a rattle trap. But what I'm doing with that chatterbait is I'm really letting it fall into the weeds and ripping it out, letting it fall and ripping it out, letting it fall and ripping it out. If the fish are eating a trap and I go cold on the trap, I'm gonna pick up the chatterbait, go back through that area and try to pick up stragglers. Also, if I have a little bit more sun and less wind, I'm gonna throw the chatterbait. If I've got a lot of wind, I'm throwing the trap. The trap gets the nod most of the time. The chatterbait's gonna be my cleanup hitter until the water gets a little bit colder, second half of November. The chatterbait plays all winter, right? With that in mind, as fish are in transition zones, the importance of the blade bait at number 3 here is going to be super important. What the blade does for you is it allows you to target fish that are holding on the bottom or fish that are bait fish oriented. The blade can cast a mile. This is a half-ounce blade by handing right here. This half-ounce blade, you can chuck it out there, let it fall. You can burn it across shell beds and rock. You can yo-yo it. Small hops are key on the chatterbait. Small hops are key on the blade bait. You're seeing what I'm talking about here. Bottom contact is going to become ultra important in the month of November because fish become bottom oriented in this transition from fall to winter. The blade bait is the ultimate reaction bait. I'm going to fish this all the way through the winter. The blade bait is going to stay on my deck. It is one of the best pure reaction bites. It's one of the best cold water bites, and you can catch a ton of fish on the blade. right? I'm gonna do a full breakdown on how to fish the blade in another video, but trust me folks, you wanna fish a blade bait. So that's 3 right there. The next one that I'm gonna do when fish stop biting moving baits, I'm going to go with the finesse jig. Now, I tie my own jigs. I do 3/8 ounce brush puppy jigs from Lure Parts Online. I like green pumpkin black flake with a Berkeley Havoc Pit Boss trailer, or I like that 3/8 ounce jig in a bluegill color pattern with a Bass Pro Shops clack and craw. Now, I just did a full video on fishing bottom baits this time of the year, but the finesse jig is ultra important this time of year because what it's going to do is it's going to get bites on bottom-oriented fish. You can fish these in dying vegetation, wood, rock cover, anywhere, junk fish, a jig, you're gonna catch them. But what you wanna consider with the jig is going to get bigger bites than a Ned rig would, than a small worm, than a small naked craw would. For some reason, big fish bite the jig, and it looks like an extra rich protein meal right now when fish are trying to fatten up for winter. So don't sleep on the jig, finesse jig in bluegill colors or finesse jig in green pumpkin until the water gets into the 40s, and then I'm going to go flat brown or black. Don't tell me why those colors produce in the 40s. Don't tell anybody I told you, but flat brown jigs and matte black and brown jigs, they are lights out in cold water. Don't know why, can't tell you why. Never figured it out, but boy, they will catch them. But in the 50s, bluegill color with blue sapphire, green pumpkin, black flake. Great jig colors to throw in the early month of November. Next up, the single swim bait. Don't ask me why, but when fishing gets really, really, really tough, if you pick up a 3.8 inch swim bait and chuck and wind on windy points, on windy flats, you're gonna catch fish. And it's because they're fattening up and eating. Here's the Mayer 3.8 right here. Great bait to throw. 3.8 Kitech, great bait to throw. Whatever your favorite 3-inch swim bait is, this is the time where it's going to shine. I like to throw them on a Matt Allen head from Dirty Jigs. Just have a lot of confidence in that jig head. There's a lot of jig heads out there. The plain jig head and swim bait gets the nod this time of the month. Now, as the water transitions from the 60s into the 50s, the chandelier is going to play. Now, this is a bait that I'm going to promise you to spend more time with this year. I like to catch fish on a trap. I like to catch fish on a blade bait and a swim bait and a jig. I have caught fish on the chandelier, but I've not spent enough time getting to know this bait in 50-degree water. This bait can be lights out. I've had great smallmouth days fishing it. I've had great largemouth days fishing it, but it's a bait that it's one of those baits for whatever reason. I throw it for a while, I catch a couple fish on it, and then I do something else. The ultimate reaction bite happens in the 50s with this. If you listen to anybody that likes to throw the rig, Seth Fighter has a great video on it. Guys talking about the rig. Tactical Bassin, those guys are my heroes. They throw the rig. And what you want to do in the 50s is you want to pop this rig through vegetation. You want to stop, give it pauses, wind it. Stop, give it pauses, wind it. More blades, the better. In Indiana, we can only fish 3 baits. So I run one in the back, a different color. I run these 2 there. 1/8 ounce jig heads, right? And what you're gonna see with this rig is you're gonna catch a lot of fish. And it's one of those baits that you gotta put in your hand and lock in there till you figure it out. I had to do that with a jig a long time ago. Everybody used to tell me jig bite, jig bite, jig bite, and I used to think the jig was trash, straight garbage, can't catch anything. And then one day I decided I'm gonna lock the jig in my hand until I understand it. And I spent 8 hours on the water throwing nothing but a jig. And for the first 6 hours, I hated my life. And then those last 2 hours, I figured out how to fish a jig effectively, and I blasted them, right? And ever since then, I've had confidence. The A-rig is the same dynamic, the same thing. You gotta lock it in your hand, you gotta chuck and wind, you gotta put active stuff on it, you gotta fish it everywhere like you would a spinnerbait, and bam, you're gonna start catching them. And once you start figuring out what fish want, it becomes an effective tool, right? It's become an ultra effective way to catch fish in cold water. It plays all the way down into the 40s when the single swim baits can outshine it, but in the 50s, the king of everything is the rig. So chuck the chandelier at them so you know how to do it, what to do. The 50-degree water in the fall, get out there on the break, find some bait fish, chuck the shandy at them. You won't be disappointed. Guys, I hope you learned something today. At this channel, we seek to educate you about fishing. We're not trying to sell you junk. We're not trying to do any of that stuff. Enough people do that already. We're trying to tell you what works, what we like to do in certain situations where you can catch them better. Guys, we hope you learned something today. We hope you enjoyed it. Please support us in our Omnia links please support us at handing. It means a lot. It means that we're able to do more for you, right? Love spending time with you guys. Let us know in the comment section what you want to see in the future. Go out there and catch them. We'll be back with a November baits part 2 in about 3 weeks when we get that change, right? Right around Thanksgiving, we get into that early winter period, and there are 3 baits right there that are lights out to catch them in that winter period. So, guys, enjoy some of the best fishing of the year right now. Give us a like, subscribe, and we will see you next time.